First of all, I want to welcome the Vaad Rabbonim from Tzfas, and Rav Koenig mit 2.5 clients. Bruchim Aboim. Okay, last week we were learning the dinim of Muktzeh, and we're in the middle of finishing up really what the concept is called Keli Shimolacten leheter. That means a vessel whose primary usage is for something you're allowed to use on Shabbos. We gave a lot of examples of things. Basically, something you're allowed to use on Shabbos is called Keli Shimolacten leheter. But just to finish up a few more things, like artificial plants, fake plants. Plants that grow, that are still growing in a pot, are completely muktzeh on Shabbos. But for instance, cut flowers are not muktzeh. Artificial plants that don't grow, it's fake. They're not muktzeh on Shabbos, so if they're on the table, you can move it. You need it. I mean, it's Keli Shimolacten leheter, basically, you move it for any reason. Now, safety pins, different than sewing needles, safety pins technically could be used on Shabbos. There are permissible ways of putting in a safety pin in clothing on Shabbos. Therefore, safety pins is again Keli Shimolacten leheter. It's a primary purpose is for something which is allowed to be done on Shabbos. Sewing needles is a different story because that is something primarily used for sewing. So then it's Keli Shimolacten leheter that we learned already and will continue. Toothpicks are not muktzeh on Shabbos. Magnets, according to most opinions, are not at all muktzeh on Shabbos. There are opinions I want to say they're muktzeh, but most people say they're not muktzeh, and that's the way most of the people paskin that magnets. Now, unless, let's say you're magnetizing a dollar bill to the refrigerator. So because then the magnet is used for something completely muktzeh, so therefore the magnet is also muktzeh. But stam, you want to put a magnet on the fridge or connect it with a picture that's not muktzeh, so then the magnet is not muktzeh at all on Shabbos. Okay, the next category, which we really explained already, we discussed a number of examples of that, but there's a lot more examples than what we discussed. And that is what's called Keli Shimolacten leheter. Keli Shimolacten leheter means it's a keli, it is a vessel, but its primary use, like we just said, is for something forbidden on Shabbos. An example is a pen primarily is made to write with. That's the purpose of a pen. You're not allowed to write on Shabbos. So then a pen is what's called Keli Shimolacten leheter. Its primary use is for something forbidden. A sewing needle, things like that. Because you're not allowed to sew on Shabbos, and its primary use is for something forbidden on Shabbos, so therefore it becomes what's called Keli Shimolacten leheter. Its a primary purpose is for something forbidden. Now, what's the din of Keli Shimolacten leheter? We discussed it, but it was a week or two ago. The din of Keli Shimolacten leheter means you're allowed to move it, let's say the gufay or mekaymei, meaning either you need to do something permissible with that keli, which is designated for primary use forbidden, or you need the place where that thing is. To give an example, we'll kill two birds with one stone. A hammer, the primary use of a hammer is for construction. Construction is forbidden on Shabbos. Therefore, a hammer is Keli Shimolacten leheter. What happens if somebody left the hammer on the dining room table and you need the place to serve? If you don't need the place, it's muktzeh. But what happens, you need the place where the hammer is. So then you're allowed to pick up the hammer and you're allowed to take it and put the hammer where it belongs. You don't even have to drop it right after the table. The halacha is once you have it in your hand, you can carry it and put it away where it belongs. Or that's called tzarech mekaymei. You need the place where the hammer is on. Another way that it's not muktzeh, where you're allowed to use it, and that's called the tzarech gufay. What does tzarech gufay mean? You want to do something permissible with this hammer. For instance, you want to crack open a coconut. Opening a coconut on Shabbos is allowed. So now we want to take the hammer and use it to crack open a coconut. So according to halacha, you're allowed to take the hammer with a screwdriver, in fact, both are muktzeh, right, building utensils, and you're allowed to crack open the coconut. Some poskim write that if there's something equally available that's not muktzeh, then you should preferably use the thing which is not muktzeh. But the halacha is if it's more convenient or it's better, it functions better, to use the keli Shimolacten l'isser rather than something else, you're allowed to use that on Shabbos. I'll give you another example where people are shocked when they hear it, but this is the halacha. I want to open a package of food, okay? So we learned already that if the package is sealed on top, like potato chips, you're not allowed to just pull it open. That's tearing without destruction. You're not ruining the bag. The bag is still intact. What happens if I want to cut the bag? I want to get to the food. I want to cut the bag. The problem is, we learned already in other times, you're not allowed to cut letters on Shabbos. You're not allowed to cut words on Shabbos. That's a din of meichik. You're erasing. So what happens if somebody has a bag of food and they want to open it up? The problem is letters. Now, if you just take it with a knife or just rip the bag, you're probably going to end up ripping letters, which is forbidden on Shabbos. So halachically, you're allowed to take a scissors, which is normally keli Shimolacten l'isser, because made to cut, which normal cutting is not allowed on Shabbos, and you're allowed to cut the bag open with the scissors in a way that you don't cut letters, because it's more practical. So then it's not muktzeh. But what happens though? Where you're not allowed to move it. So for instance, it says Chabad tetzel, or if you want to move it because you don't want it to get stolen, or you don't want to get lost, so then you can't move it for that reason. You can't move it because you're not moving it. Tzerich gufei means you want to do something permissible with the thing that you want. Just moving it to protect the object itself, you're not allowed. What? Correct. And kriya. It's two problems. You know? The pearl, you ruined the bag from the way it was. It's still ruining the bag. It's not a brand new bag that's reusable as is. No, you're not ruining the bag. You're just separating the pieces. Besides the fact that's real kriya. That's kriya that's not destroying.
But if you cut off the whole piece of the top, it's still the same.
It's not the bag the way it was. You destroyed the bag from what it was.
You didn't make it into a kli? It's like
It was a kli. You're not making it into a kli. Cans, I'm not getting into cans now. Cans are machlekes and poskim about opening them. But, every time, that doesn't mean you're making a keli every time you destroy something. If it's derech kilkul, then you're destroying it. It's not the same way it was before, so then it has the din of kilkul, and then it's with Rabbanim, which is permitted for food.
But it's not glued on top when you're separating.
It is glued on top. So that's kri also, I said.
some of them are good, some of them are melted.
What?
Sometimes it's melted.
So the heat is the shot, if it's not glue and it's heat holding it together, is that not glue?
Is it good?
It's still kareya, you're still separating two pieces that are stuck together without ruining it. It's not so posh. What? Keli Shimolacten l'isser or leheter?
Yeah, I mean the keli itself.
So the din is, al pi din, in halacha it says, if it's used more li'isser, I'll give you an example. Then leheter, it's still keli Shimolacten l'isser. I'll give 1 second. I'll give you an example. A pot that you cook in, yeah? That is a keli Shimolacten l'isser. Because what is this pot used for? What's a normal pot used for? It's used to cook. Cooking is not allowed on Shabbos. You also store food in it, and you do what, but that's not what it's made for. Ask somebody, what is the primary purpose of a pot? The answer is to cook in it. Now, the reason why a pot, by the way, a pot as a din of Shimolacten, the only problem is, not the problem, when there's food in the pot, then it's not muktzeh at all, because the pot bottle is secondary to the food, and the food is never muktzeh, unless it's food that you're not allowed to eat, or not edible food. But a pot that has food in it, even by a halacha of carrying, if somebody carries a plate, and the plate is big enough to be called carrying, but on the plate they're carrying a little piece of food, which is not enough food to be called carrying for food. Yeah? So the Gemara says, if you take out a keli with food in it, or on it, it's only rabbinically forbidden. Why aren't you chai for carrying the plate? Because the plate is a non-existent, it's inferior to the food, and the food is not the proper share, so therefore, anytime you have food in a pot, the pot is bottled to the food, so it's not muktzeh. That's why you can take chicken soup that has chicken soup in it, you can take it, move it, put it away, whatever you want, you can put it back in the fridge. That's not it's a goofy mekaymeh, right? But you're allowed to, because it's not muktzeh, because it's bottled to the food. But if you have an empty pot, somebody left out before Shabbos an empty pot on the counter. Yeah? So if they need the space on the counter, it's called tzarich mekaymeh. What if they don't need the space on the counter? They just don't want it they want to put it away. Then you're not allowed to. It's kedush Shimolacten listen. So by kedush Shimolacten listen, it says do harama. In other words, what happens if you have the hammer left outside and it's raining? You don't want it's stolen. Whatever. You don't want it to get lost. It's stolen. Yeah. So normally you're not allowed to bring it in. It's muktzeh. What happens if I decide I want to crack open a walnut? So then I'm using it. Let's say the goofy. So now halacha said you could be madim, it means you could cheat a little bit, and you can create a purpose for the hammer, to bring it inside. Then if you want to move the pot and you want to put food into it, on Shabbos you're allowed to put food into it, and then it's not muktzeh anymore. What?
So on Shabbos, the biscuit bags the kids eat. So from what age should they, 6, 7,
That's for what? You mean they shouldn't open it like this with the glue? So, if it's not the father of the kid, they have no chiyuv in chinuch of the kid. It's not their kid. If it's their kid, then as long as you didn't give it to him be a dime and he does it, you don't have to be meichem. If the kid is doing it on his own and you didn't tell him to do it, you're not, and there's a way that he could do it, you're not muchayiv to be meich. Obviously, the proper thing is to teach the kid how to do it correctly. But al pidin, you don't have to be meich. Only the father would have to be meich. And if he didn't give it to him biyadayim, then you also don't have to. Chinuch begins in Shchnoch from the age of 6 and 7, b'derech klal. Well, we'll get there one day. Raw egg is not muktzeh because people eat raw egg. The chazanim, the gogo-mogo, what do they call it? No, it was a common thing in the olden days. Raw meat would be muktzeh. Maybe now it's starting to change a little bit. No, halachic, it's a mitzias. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, raw meat wasn't always muktzeh, because people used to eat raw meat. Then when people stopped eating raw meat, it became muktzeh, right? And you're not going to give it to the klovim. So that's what I'm saying. So now sushi, raw fish that people eat as sushi is lav dafka muktzeh anymore. And the same thing with meat, with tartar, something. So with the meat, they're starting to eat it raw. What's it called? No, huh? Tartar. So I was right. Tartar, whatever. So it could be. In other words, it's not. Why isn't this working?
Officially, still they would say it's
Huh?
They don't exempt it from being official for kashrus purposes.
Kashrus person has nothing to do with muktzeh. Bishul has nothing to do with Muktzeh. There's a din of Bishul. Huh? No, but it's not that. It's not dafka. What?
So if you want to use a small screwdriver to pop open a bathroom door, they got locked.
That's Seirach Gufa. You'd be allowed to do it. Especially if there's nothing more accessible, then everybody holds you allowed to. Obviously, if you have something else that's not Muktzeh, then you could.
Plank of wood, small plank of wood. I might show you, on Shabbat I was giving chickens to eat. So I was by some house, they had chickens. I put on a sleeve of wood, but chicken.
1 minute. Why did you give other people's food, animals, to eat on Shabbos?
I was staying in his house, he told me.
It's not your chiv, it's his chiv. Okay, but you did it for his shlich. Okay. No, because you're not allowed to feed animals Tamazay in Shabbos that don't belong to you.
Right, no, it
Okay.
belonged to him.
Okay, fine. A plank of wood is muktzeh on Shabbos. Unless if you designate it before Shabbos, permanently, for some. We discussed many times the whole issue, how they throw stones in Yerushalayim at the cars driving by. The stones are muktzeh. So people want to say they designate them before Shabbos. But Shulchan Aruch it says they're only stones and avonim and things like that were real muktzeh. Hachana only helps if you meichen them la'olam. Like if somebody has a rock and they want to use it for a door stopper, so then you designate it for permanently. But those rocks you don't get back again. So the shaila is how they throw rocks in Shabbos. There's an aid of them, but there's mamish. All the whole world's rocks. Oh, it's late. Oh no, we did that already.